I'm driving, get west of San Saba, driving along. And I remember there was a spot there where there's a big tree on the side of the road. And I saw something black moving a little bit. I thought, what is that, a cow? And all of a sudden, this thing stands up. I'm not a little guy. This thing's arms are bigger around than both of my legs each. And I'm like, whoa, what? And of course, it scared the daylights out of me. I went from staring at my radio to looking up at this thing that's lit up by my bright headlights. And it's right there, not 15 feet off the road. And I watched it as it went by. It scared the daylights out of me. And I went from being kind of sleepy to wide freaking awake right there.
This is Bigfoot Crossroads. My name is Matt, and joining me is Randy. Randy is someone that I have talked to on and off over the years, and I was trying to think earlier. I don't remember a time in the online Bigfoot community where I didn't know of you. You have been around for a really long time and kind of a neighbor down there in Texas.
Exactly, yeah.
How did this whole thing get started for you?
We had a mutual friend who really got me off center to start looking at things that I have seen in my life. And it made me realize these things that I've seen and kind of dismissed in my life may have some validity. There may be certain things that are real about them. And I guess it all started back in the early to mid 70s. I was a young kid. I wanted to go hunting so bad with my dad. Didn't know how to shoot, but I wanted to be out there with Dad. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And in Central Texas, where I'm from, it used to get really cold before dawn, especially right at the first of deer season. And so it's freezing and everything. And Dad finally agreed, yeah, come on, we'll go along. So where we were was west of Interstate 35. My grandfather had a ranch out there. And I went with Dad, and we got there around 3 a.m. and I was all excited. The stars were real bright. It was clear, so you knew it was going to be really cold. But I was with Dad. That's all that mattered. And went to my grandfather's ranch. We met with my cousins and my uncle who ran the place. And they took us in this old pickup. You know, we always have to have that one old ranch truck.
Sure.
We went way out in the back of this place. And this is a little south of a town called Salado and north of a town called Georgetown. And we're probably 10, 12 miles west of Interstate 35. Very wooded, oak country. The Salado Ranch, or no, not the Salado Ranch, what do they call it? Salado Creek actually runs through that property. And Dad and I were assigned to a tree stand, which is like a big tree house way up in this big oak tree there. So we were sitting there, and I was all excited, and Dad and I were sitting there talking. And it was cold, man. It was really cold. And I'm not good in the cold. I never have been.
Me either.
You know, mid-20s, it was not for me. And, you know, that's pretty cold for us. You guys in Oklahoma get it even a little colder. Well, we're sitting there, and I'm looking at the stars, and I don't know, it was around 5 a.m. I clearly heard a woman screaming. And this went on, and I looked at my dad. I said, Dad, what's that? What's that thing? What is that? It was what? I'd forgotten Dad was a combat veteran from World War II. His hearing was shot. He had more than 50% of it gone. And I'm listening to that, and it's creeping me out. And I'm like, well, I've heard foxes squeal by that point, but I'd never heard this. This was clearly a woman screaming, and she was less than 100 yards away. And you know, when it's cold, sound carries really well. It may have been a little bit more. But this was going on and on and on. We're miles from anywhere. The Solana Ranch butts up to this property, and that's 10,000 plus acres. There's nothing out there. Anyhow, so I go, what is that? Well, that's strange. Well, not realizing, not having been out that much, it was dead that morning. Nobody got a deer except one of my cousins. There was one little buck that got out in this probably 5-10 acre clearing that was in front of us. And well, my cousins got him, but he didn't move. He stayed right out in the middle after that. Well, that scream before, the screaming had ended close to dawn. And so it went on 30, maybe 40 minutes.
Wow.
On and off. It went on a long time. Foxes don't squeal like that.
No.
They'll squeal a little bit, then they'll get scared and run away. And I'm like, what was that? That was weird. And I told Dad about it. He said, son, I just can't hear it. I said, I understand. And so I went to my cousins and I asked them, and one of them said, no, I didn't hear anything. I went to the other one. This is one I really trust and really like him. And I said, Andy, I shouldn't have said his name, but it doesn't matter. I said, what was that? And he kind of looked down and he said, well, foxes make all kind of strange noises. I said, Andy, that wasn't a fox. I know better. So I've been out with them hunting and things, so I knew what they sounded like. Plus, they were pretty rare out there. You didn't see them very much. So I just kind of filed that off in the bin of strange things.
Right.
And it was just one of those weird things.
Did the screaming move any, or was it just always from the same spot?
It was from the same spot, man. From the same spot.
That had to have been pretty scary.
Well, we're sitting there with a couple of high-powered hunting rifles, and I'm with my dad, so that made everything just fine. There was no problems. But I'm like, your imagination can run away with you. And being who I am and what I do, I try to not let my imagination run away with me because it's part of what I do. But I'm like, that was really strange. And I asked my uncle about it, and he just said, no, nothing. Interesting things about that property. My other cousin, male, when he was out there, this guy was constantly down looking for signs of things moving, looking for anything moving. And he was like, be quiet, don't move. I'm like, if we're just going to spook some white-tailed deer or maybe some quail or see a roadrunner, that's no big deal. Occasional turkeys, that's one thing. But he was always really cautious out there. And the land is still it's in their family name now. But I often wonder, because there's so much, it's open from there all the way back into the Texas Hill Country, a good 50, 60 miles to the west. And there have been some reports out that way. And I wonder, after becoming more aware and finally admitting to myself that, this was pretty strange. I needed, it was just really strange, man. I don't know how to describe it. But that other cousin was always on the high alert when we were out there, and he was always armed. Even when it wasn't deer season, he always had something with him. So, well, I grew up, went through high school, started on college in Central Texas, and the next event happened. And I actually can pin down the actual date that this one was. We were on Christmas break, and my friend Eddie, I think it was him, he had to study because his semester actually picked up, it finished right after the first of the year. And he said, well, let's go for a movie. Okay. So we're standing around in my parents' house in Central Texas, and all of a sudden we started hearing helicopters. Well, we hear a lot of helicopters over there. The big twin rotor Chinooks, things like that. You hear those things. And the what do they call them? The Cobras, you would hear those, but there weren't even Apaches out yet. They hadn't even been introduced. The M1 tanks had just been introduced out there. But that's 30 miles west of where we lived. And, well, there's a couple of them coming over, a couple more, and then a couple more. And I'm going, what is going on? Well, they often had an exercise that time of year where they would train the soldiers. You see how I kind of dismiss this thing as logically as possible.
Sure.
Well, they just, we got 9 times out of 10, it's always the most common. Well, before it was over, it was at least 20 of these things went by, and smaller ones too, the little Hughes 500s. We all went outside, myself and my 2 friends, Eddie and Brian. And we looked, and the last 4 or 5 of these things are all headed down to the southeast. And I thought that was weird. So we went to the movies, gave much more thought. Well, guess what? In the next couple of days, a big news came out. Down here near where I live now, a little to the east of me, a couple of elderly ladies and their grandson were driving in a car. And all of a sudden, a large UFO came down right over the road and was hovering there. This is called the Cash-Landrum incident. The days line up perfectly. And they said twin rotor helicopters came around and escorted this thing away. Those 3 all suffered, and the 2 women may have actually died of radiation burns. The boy, not so bad. He's still alive.
Yeah, I remember that story. I think it was like actually on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries once.
It sure was, and on UFO Hunters. And I go, God, I saw those helicopters that night.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, well, UFOs, I could kind of go, okay, maybe there's something out there. Maybe it was just something we didn't know what it was, or they didn't know what it was. And being in my more technologically oriented career, I had an interest in military aviation, but that matched nothing that we've seen. I can take you to that general area right now. I know where it is. I've actually gone over there and looked around. And it's interesting, but it's one of those big unknowns.
Yeah.
And so, well, that was pretty much it that night. I didn't see anything else, and I never saw those helicopters come back. This is where it starts getting interesting. Many years had passed by, and I was in my, I guess I was in my 20s now, maybe 5, 6, 7 years later. It was spring break. I was with a friend, and another friend came by, and he said, I'm going out to West Texas. I want to see these Marfa lights. Oh, cool. I've heard of them. Well, my friend Brian was with me, and Paul, and said, let's go. So, Texas is a big place, man.
Yeah, it is. It takes forever to get anywhere.
It is shorter to have a guy drive down from Chicago to Dallas to do service work than it is to send someone from El Paso back. And we're 3/4 of the way to El Paso where we're going. And, well, young 20-something kids, a bunch of college kids, I was already out by this time. I said, sure, let's go. So we take off. We drive all day. We go to one of these swap fests that I mentioned later on in here. And, well, we get to Marfa, Texas. We negotiated with the guys for a cheaper room. Then we all just, like guys, we just crashed out there. And we were tired. I said, okay, let's go out. Let's go see if we can find these Marfa lights. Well, we go out there. And we're sitting there. Look, we got 2 engineers and an accountant sitting out there looking at these things. And we're like, oh, wait a minute. And I got my binoculars out. And we're seeing 3 of these bright lights move off in the distance. 3 have moved back. Some red lights go the other. Pretty soon we realized those were the lights on the Presidio Highway. We started laughing. We're going, this is a bunch of crap. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, yeah, this is really nothing. And, Paul we did a few time exposure photos, those are always fun. And, it looked pretty good. But what I didn't know was that area right there where you go with the viewing area, that used to be a military base a long time ago. You can still see it on Google Earth where all the foundations were. Didn't know that. It's an interesting factoid. Well, I thought, okay, that's pretty neat. And so we're getting ready to go back to the hotel. And I looked over, and this You remember those really blue HID headlights, bluish, whitish ones?
Of course.
Not the LEDs the kids all have.
Right.
Back then, those were rare. Well, there was something really bright, right straight down towards southern Marfa right there. But we're 10, 12 miles out of town, over a hill. And I'm like, what the heck is that? My friend goes, that's nothing. That's nothing. I go, no, that's something right there. And it flickers. And it stayed pretty stationary. And I was like, wow, check it out. Well, guess what? That was the real thing. And I actually saw them.
Wow.
I had absolutely no idea what that was. If it was someone with a headlight playing around, they just spent thousands of dollars to pull a prank. Because in those days, those headlights were like $2,000 options on your Lincolns or your Mercedes. And now it's common, no problem. But back then, that was something to see. I got to see them on the very first time I ever went out to look for them. Have been out there since. Never saw them again.
Huh.
They say they're still there. But it's a funny flickering light. And they say they move, but this one sort of just stayed in one spot and flickered at us. And as we drove back towards Marfa, I kept watching it. And by the way, the Santa Fe tracks were right by there. And you could tell the difference between a Santa Fe train, that big halogen incandescent light, versus this blue thing. Completely different. And it was a fascinating thing. Time passed. I'm in my 30s. And the job I had really wasn't a lot of fun. And so, honestly, it was terrible. And I was bored to death and really wasn't a great place for me to be. Well, I'd taken some time off and I was going to go out to West Texas. And bear in mind, I kind of dismissed everything except the Marfa lights up to this point. And it's like 96. In fact, it was April 16th, 1996, Friday before St. Patrick's Day. And there's a swap fest I wanted to go to out in West Texas in Midland. And I said, I'm going to just do it, have some fun. So I loaded up my car with my goodies and, took the odds and ends with me. And I'm going to this thing. I'm going to get out of town. So I started out of my town, drove through Killeen right by the Fort Hood base, drove on out west. And finally, you have to make a turn to go up to a little town called San Saba. And I'm not thinking about anything. I'm tired. I'm thinking there's got to be something on the radio to listen to, Art Bell or something. Nothing. Like I said, Texas is a big place, and you can go for miles without having anything to listen to. At least you could in those days. And I'm driving, get west of San Saba, driving along, dropped down over I believe it was the San Saba River Bridge. I thought it was Colorado, but I think it's San Saba. And I come back up, and I remember there was a spot there where there's a big tree on the side of the road, right close to the right of way. And I saw something black moving a little bit. I thought, what is that, cow? And all of a sudden, this thing stands up, and I can see more of an ape-like face. Huge arms, Matt. I'm not a little guy. This thing's arms are bigger around than both of my legs each. It stands up, and it's almost like, hey, get out of here. And I'm like, whoa, what? And, of course, it scared the daylights out of me. I went from staring at my radio to looking up at this thing that's lit up by my bright headlights, and it's right there, not 15 feet off the road, and I watched it as it went by. You know how your headlights fade out, but there's still just a little light on my left? And I watched it, and I swerved, scared the daylights out of me. And I went from being kind of sleepy to wide freaking awake right there. I'm like, oh, my God. And I didn't know what to think. I hit my brake lights because, they had those big red brake lights up on the top of the rear glass. Didn't see anything. But, it was a little off the road. And I looked back, and I was like, what the hell? And I looked around. It's 2:45 in the morning. I remember I looked at the time. I was like, and I thought maybe I should turn around and go see what that was. Was that a prank? Was that a hoax? I mean, Matt, that thing had to be 10 feet tall and half that wide. I mean, at least. I couldn't actually see anything below its knees. The lights didn't shine that well. And then it was out of the lights, the edge of the lights of the car, but it was there.
This is West Texas, right?
Yeah, western central Texas. You can look down on a map, San Saba, and you'll see the San Saba River just on the west, and I think it's Highway 36.
What kind of terrain is this?
Rolling prairie, rocky, a lot of granite and rock, but a lot of oak forest. That's where all the Texans like to have their deer property at. They'll go lease out there because there's tons of whitetail out there, tons of jackrabbits, lots of turkey. And yeah, it's rolling prairie and small forest. Well, looking later on, just up and beyond where we were, there's a pecan orchard there.
Really?
I didn't know it, but I looked. But I mean, it wasn't within a quarter mile from there. At least 100 acres of pecan trees. And in the early time like that, maybe there were things out there it could forage.
And this was in the river bottom.
No, it was above the river bottom. We're coming up. We're up on about where that is not a canyon type river. It's more just as natural. It's just sort of a slow depression. And as you get to the top on the western side, right there.
Did you see any like eye shine or anything?
No, the eyes were large and dark.
Solid black?
Solid black. I could kind of make out that there were eyes there, but I did not see any eye shine. Also, I didn't smell anything, but remember, I'm driving at highway speed.
Right.
I'm going by about 55, 60 miles an hour. I'm like, what on earth? And I could see its fingers, because you know how if you were to get up and shoo something away from you with your hand, that's kind of what it was doing to me.
Like it did that gesture.
Like that with both arms. Go away. Like, get out of here. And I'm like, what the? That's not supposed to be there. At this point in my life, that, if it existed at all, was somewhere in Northern California or the West Coast. I had no idea we had these things around here.
I mean, was it even something that like you had looked into or were interested in?
Not at all. I mean, if there was a Bigfoot show on TV, yes, I would watch it. Those were fun. But it was the farthest thing from my mind. Face it, I'm an engineer. I think about real things, numbers,
right,
odds, percentages. That's not something I would be looking for. And I'm like, it couldn't be. That couldn't have been. I immediately dismissed it. All day long, I kept saying, I did not see that. Matt, my heart didn't slow down till I got to the other side of Texas. I had nightmares from that. It was like, let's say I saw some hallucinations. Hallucinations don't cause you to have nightmares.
Yeah.
They don't. You might relive the situation. I never have, never wanted to.
Were you able to get a look at its face?
Pretty good, yeah. Almost chimp-like. Chimp-like, large teeth. I can't say exact color. Hair, most of the face was covered with hair except around the mouth. Slightly, you know how chimps have a slightly bulging mouth?
Right.
The nose was not a chimp nose. It was partially bridged like ours, but almost flat up and down, or real close to where it came down to the bridge of its mouth. I saw that, and I looked right into its face. And, interestingly enough, I told our mutual friend that one time. I said, yeah, its teeth were flat. I would assume if it was a primate that it would have like chimp-like teeth with with pointy canines. It did not. And so I'm like, this can't be, to me. When you're suddenly confronted with something that's real, every bit as real as, the walls on your house, but you try to deny it. Well, it was medium length hair, not long, stringy, fairly well kept from what I remember. And again, its arms are huge. The head did not protrude far above the shoulders. It seemed like maybe the tops of the shoulders met its neck or something, because it's not like a human where our head sticks freely up above. It was down, like 50% lower, where it would be down more in between the shoulder blades. But it was there.
You said you got to look at its fingers. What did its hands look like?
Big. Have you ever seen like those old farmers up in Oklahoma? They have those big, wide sausages for fingers.
I was raised by one.
Okay.
Yeah.
The big old fingers, when they weren't on the farm, they were playing football on Friday nights. That's the kind of fingers this thing had. Thumbs and all, huge. And that I recall that there wasn't as much hair on the hands from what I remember. And it was like, oh my God. So it's, and then mostly black. The belly might have been a slightly lighter shade of black, it seemed like, but it was black.
Did it have any sort of facial expression?
Yeah, it looked like it was pissed off. Mouth was wide open. And it was, you could see that thing had a mouth as wide as my head. And it looked pissed. I don't know if I disturbed it eating a deer it had found or caught, or maybe it just didn't want to see me, or I hear some just enjoy scaring people. But I don't know. I don't have enough. I've never been out in the field looking for one of these things. Not really. And it was, it looked, as best I could tell, as like, shoot, get out of here. Go away. Was about the kind of impression I got from it. But it looked like it was pissed.
As you processed all this, did you reach the conclusion like, oh my God, I just saw a Bigfoot?
Matt, I knew exactly what it was the moment I laid eyes on it. But I dismissed it. And I'm a little ashamed to admit that. They don't exist here. And they may not exist at all. That's the thought I had right then and there. And honestly, I was wrong. I did see that thing. And I just didn't really know that they were around in Texas. It had never been brought out or pointed out that this was a possibility. And now, over the years, I kind of came to more of a realization about that, rationalize. Basically, I tried to put it as far behind me as possible. I did not see that. I'm imagining things. Maybe I was tired. I don't think I was, but maybe I was tired. Maybe whatever. Didn't happen. And that's the way I treated it, unfortunately. I went to my event out in Midland. I had a good time, but all day long, I'm thinking about it. All day long. That wasn't normal. That wasn't, half asleep dreaming something.
So when was it that it kind of came full circle for you and you decided that you were going to start looking into this?
Well, it came after my next event out in California. And that's when I sat there and I talked with our late friend about that. I guess it's okay to use his name. Lowell, we talked about it. I talked to him about it, and he said, "Oh, we're looking around here. Those things aren't here if they're around at all." And he goes, "Oh, there is more to this story, by the way. You know how they often say there's strange lights in the sky?"
Yeah.
Well, I kept driving, and I've gotten a little ahead of myself, but I kept driving. And you know how when a piece of space junk burns up, you get that green fireball?
Right.
This wasn't what it was. This kind of looked like a piece of cable, but it was miles long, because it covered 45 degrees up in the sky, maybe a little less, maybe 30 to 40 degrees. This uneven looking thing was moving to the west, and it looked like it was burning up in the sky, and it just disappeared. And I go, what the heck was that? Saw it within 30 minutes of me seeing that thing.
And it was like a line?
Imagine you have a steel cable.
Right.
You throw it horizontally. Somehow you figure out a way to throw it horizontally. Well, it's not going to stay straight even. It may have back loops and curves.
Right.
But it's bright green, like it's burning up in the sky. And that thing moved from the east over the top of my car on beyond. And it was high. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell was that? No one had any idea. In fact, another friend of mine I met at the Swap Fest that day said he saw that because he was coming up from Austin. He was running parallel to me and saw it. So it was high. And I was like, wow. So,
and
yeah.
How long do you think it was?
It had to be miles long. If it was burning up in the atmosphere, Matt, that thing had to be 10, 12 miles long, maybe more. Because remember, when things burn up in the atmosphere, they're at about 35 to 50 miles up. Really good 35 miles up, so they really get big. Well, if you think about it from the ground and the angle, this thing was there in the sky moving. It was like a long cable or something. Maybe something fell off the space shuttle or something. It was flying back then. It wasn't in the air that I know of.
I mean, but it wouldn't be miles long.
No. And unless they had some kind of strange experiment, I really don't know what that was. And it had that bright green shine, bright green light, like space junk burning up. Didn't make any sound that I could hear. And it was pretty cool out that morning. I had the windows up for the most part, but it just moved across the sky. And it was gone.
Green usually denotes copper, doesn't it?
Green denotes copper or titanium sometimes. But definitely copper alloys. Copper alloys are commonly used in aerospace equipment because they dissipate heat very well.
Right.
They also add surprising amount of strength to metals such as iron. That's why in the old days they made swords out of bronze. So it was one of those things. But yeah, but most of your space junk is that same color, but it doesn't look like that.
Was it moving at any sort of like angle compared to the ground or anything, or just straight down?
It wasn't coming straight down. It moved across, like it just moved across and off towards the horizon and faded out. Probably a good 2 to 3 seconds I saw it before it disappeared.
And the shape of it again was
irregular, like uneven. It wasn't, you couldn't see anything other than it was a line that kind of had bows in it, little, like imagine you throw a thin steel cable out on the ground. It's chances are it isn't going to loop or anything. It's just going to lay out, but it's going to have little waves in it. Once it hits the ground, something like that. Very strange. And unfortunately, I am cursed with a very good memory. And I'm a pretty good observer. Not great, but I'm not professionally trained, but I see things.
I'll just tell you where my mind's going.
Go ahead, tell me.
So recently I read an article that, it was on some major news outlet website, but I ran across it several places after I read it, about a group of employees at Red Rock Event Center in Colorado who had observed a UFO in broad daylight. And it was like a dozen people saw it all at once.
Okay.
And it was this situation where I believe it's an amphitheater where they work. They were outdoor, some outdoor venue. And somebody noticed there's this huge object in the sky. And I want to say it was like the size they were talking about was like a mile wide or something crazy. And according to the article, it was like whenever they noticed it and started looking at it, it started flying off. And instead of eventually hitting a vanishing point, they all say that this thing just basically turned invisible. Like it just went clear and they couldn't see it anymore. And so, like, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm wondering if something did have that type of technology or ability to cloak itself and be invisible, what would it look like entering the Earth's atmosphere? Like,
that's a good
point. Could that have been like the
that,
outer edge of some sort of vessel or something?
That's a good point. And where else to do it other than well out over West Texas, where there's nothing but the occasional military.
Yeah, where there ain't nobody around.
Exactly. And I mean, nobody for miles. I mean, I'm thinking I'm 50, 60 miles away from Fort Hood at that point where I'm at least. And I'm further west of that even now. I'm west of where I saw the thing on the side of the road. So, yeah, that's a good point.
And there's so many reports of stuff happening around military bases.
Oh, yeah, lots of them. The thing about it is that if that were like the pointy edge of something, that would make sense. I mean, your high altitude, high speed X planes, their edges of their wings would get red hot.
Yeah.
The old X-15s. The F-104s, their edges could get red hot. They were moving so fast. And of course, the Blackbird, which I always wished I could have gotten to see fly, but never did. But, yeah, it's very possible.
Or just something weird falling into the atmosphere. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they uncorked a line somewhere from the space station or space shuttle company.
But it's just very coincidental that you happen to see it right at that moment.
Yeah, just after I'd seen the other thing.
Yeah.
And that's, weird things happen. Well, okay, moving on. I did try to just dismiss everything as just happenstance, something, whatever. Well, it's 1999. I moved to Houston, finished my second run through college. I was doing really well. Very happy, fun job, working with electronic instrumentation. And I'm talking with our friend Lowell, and he starts telling me that he's doing this research up in Oklahoma and down here in Texas and different places. And I told him, no, not here. No. Well, we talked and we talked. We talked about it for quite a while. And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something. He says, no, there is. He starts telling me about an image he had about something that was out in a field he'd gotten with that flare he built. And I tried to magnify it as much as I could, but it's only a few pixels wide. And I said, it just moves. And it's moving fairly quickly across there. We never did figure out what that was. And finally, after we talked, and we went through a lot of things, and he was showing me a lot of the online community, Bigfoot community. And I said, Lowell, we need to talk about something. And I told him about it. He said, what? You? I said, yeah, I think so. I told him where. Well, we talked about it at length, and finally he introduced me to one of the local community leaders down here. And this was the weekend that I can think of in time that there was some other things going on, and I hung out with him that day. We talked and thought, well, that's pretty interesting. And, well, I started coming around at that point, Matt. I started thinking, maybe this shouldn't be dismissed so readily. Well, I had an assignment in California outside of Bakersfield, and I went out there to go out there and work on some stuff for a pipeline out there. Well, this one Thursday, they said, oh, we're going to have a safety stand down. I said, well, can I come to the safety meetings? No, you just go. You're free. We'll pay you. Just go. Okay. And, I was a basically a contract engineer for him through the company I was working for. And at the time, I decided I was going to be Mr. Nature Photographer. And so I got my best lenses and everything, and I was using a film camera. And even though digitals were out, I didn't think they quite had the performance of what I could do with my film camera. They didn't at that time. So I'm wandering around taking pictures of California poppies blooming and various things. And amazing, Matt, birds never sit still. The moment you point your lens at them, they fly off. Yeah, I've gained a great deal of respect for the guys who sit there for hours to get just the right shot.
Yeah.
I ended up wandering further and further up to the northeast of Bakersfield. I went up a road called Caliente Road. I thought that was kind of neat. Drift around back there, and finally I said, man, they're like redwood trees up here. They're not the giants, but they're really red bark, big coniferous type trees. Well, I thought, this will be good. I bet I'll find some good birds up here. Matt, it was still as a tomb up there. I think I saw one, maybe two little birds, and they flew off. I'm sitting there. All of a sudden, I started hearing like something moving through the underbrush, making some noise. And I'm like, uh-oh, we got us a bear up here or something? And I got to listening and said, that's not four legs. And I didn't know at the time, bears are pretty quiet when they move, unless they're charging you. And this thing has two legs. And it's, and I'm like, uh-oh, what is this? Well, here's a little thing of the train. I've sent you a picture where I took that picture, of that GPS unit.
Yeah.
That is right there. You can look that up. If you look on there, there's like a man-made lake down below there, which wasn't there then. And up above, there's a new ski set of ski slopes. None of that was up there. That was all empty forest out there. And there was like some kind of a camp or a church camp or something at the end of the road up further and higher, but it was pretty high. It was about 6,400 feet. And it's nice and cool up there. It felt really good. And this noise, whatever it is, I think it's stepping down there. That's when I realized, Matt, it wasn't moving. It was just making the noise. And after a little bit, I'm starting to get a little unnerved. We're got 10 minutes of this. I'm listening and I'm going, and I'm looking at it with a 200 millimeter lens down there, which is not much, but there's nothing down there that I can see through the trees. And it's just getting a little louder. It doesn't feel like it's getting any closer. Well, there was no motors. I didn't hear any kind of engines. And I didn't, something trying to get my attention away from looking up the slopes. I turned around and looked up the slope. Nothing that I could see. I looked back and forth up there. I kept looking up because I'm thinking, if I'm trying to distract somebody, I'm going to make noise over there so something behind me can move. There was nothing up there. Whatever it was down in that brush, maybe less than 100 yards in the brush, but it was making some noise, Matt, making some serious noise down in there. And it was fairly bright outside. I mean, the tree cover where I'm at is heavy. Now, let's get a picture of how this is. There's a road there that's running parallel to me. My rent car's down there below me, to my left a little bit. This is straight out in front of me, whatever's making this noise. It's almost a 40-degree slope up, and I'm 100 feet away from my car up this slope. And I'm not even maybe a fifth of the way to the top, if you will. And there's nothing behind me except trees. And they're not that thick. You can see through them. Across the road, it got more brushy. But there was nothing down there. You could hear it. Whatever it was staying just out and beyond into the brush. So I started getting a little nervous about this. Like, something's not right here. I'm getting out of here. So I kept my camera up. I looked, moved down, got into my car, snapped a picture of the GPS so I'd know right where this area was, and then I just drove away. And that was it. That was a weird one.
Do you think it could see you from its vantage point?
I think it could. I'm up there in a white long sleeve sweatshirt type thing.
Yeah.
Blue jeans. I'm just wearing normal hiking boots. I didn't make any effort to camouflage myself, and it didn't start till I went up on that hill.
And how long was the whole ordeal, would you estimate?
Between 10 and 15 minutes.
Yeah, see, that's
weird.
That's
man.
not how animals behave. You know what I mean?
No, I know. Animal will make some noise, 20 seconds maybe at the most, and it's gone.
Yeah.
This was making noise down there. I think it was trying to unnerve me to get me to leave.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, it succeeded. And I got out of there. And I've often wondered about that one. Well, I got back and I called my friend, our friend, mutual friend. And I started explaining it to him. And he said, well, was there something behind you? I said, not that I could see. And, film photography was a little expensive. I didn't want to waste a bunch of shots, but I regret not just holding down the shutter and just going through 20 exposures really fast just to see if I caught anything. But I didn't. Nowadays, I'm pretty well equipped with digital cameras. So if I run into that same situation, I will.
I mean, I kind of agree with your assessment of the situation. I think it was definitely sort of an intimidation thing to try and get you to leave the area. Could be a distraction. It might have been a situation where, and this is of course just speculation. This is right. Bigfoot Crossroads, so we're just going to pretend that it was a Bigfoot.
Amen.
There could have been a young one that was laying down flat, staying still, or maybe it wasn't even a young one. You might have been right on top of one and didn't even realize it.
There was just enough trees around. You can't really see it good from the picture there, but looking down that road, there was still some snow on the ground up there at that time. It's very possible that something could have been behind one of those trees.
Yeah.
The whole floor was covered with pine needles. If it's close to that color, I might have easily dismissed something.
Yeah.
And something else wanted me to get away from it. So it was really spooky. Well, I get back, I talked with my friend Lowell, and he had pretty much the same opinion that there was something there. And I just didn't see it. Had I been more careful and looked around, maybe I would have seen a little one or something laying there. I don't know. As far as I can remember, I didn't see anything.
It might have been a better situation that you didn't see anything.
That's very true.
Especially if there was like a young one and you ended up spotting it and then it knew it was spotted and the other one knew that it was spotted, the situation could have changed dramatically in a hurry.
Yeah, I think so. But, I had come around now to admitting to myself that what I saw near San Saba was real. And all the noise and everything that's been going on. That this thing out there, right there where people see them all the time. If you look on the national map from BFRO, that whole area is just covered with sightings. And I'm like, wow, okay. That brings me to my last thing, which was not Bigfoot related, but I might as well throw it in.
Yeah.
2004, I got home from work and it was time to take my two little Shih Tzus out, Gidget and Shorty. They needed their little walk. It's overcast and it's gray. And, I just thought, I'll just take them off down the driveway. And we go walking down the driveway and they're on their little leashes and they're all happy as can be. And get to the end of the driveway and I looked up to the east down my street. And there's this guy walking up the street. I looked right at him. He's tall, very thin hair on top, big nose, glasses, white work shirt on, like You know, he had a pocket protector. I could see, had a long jacket, kind of work, kind of work/casual shoes and like Dockers. I thought, that's kind of strange. Oh, well, must be a neighbor I just hadn't met. The dogs didn't notice him. Dogs didn't see him. We turned to the left and started heading west up the street, up the hill. And, he was walking pretty quick. He was making pretty good strides. I went maybe 50, 60 feet, and I turned around. Matt, there was nothing there. Nothing. This was about like 5:30 or so in the afternoon. And I looked and I thought, what the heck? So I started walking back. I turned around with the dogs, and where'd he go? I called my wife. I said, hey, lock the front door. There's somebody strange out here. And myself and my next door neighbor to the east, to that side, we didn't have fences in those days. We lived in the country. We didn't care if your dog ran in my yard. Great. I didn't care. So I called her and I said, do you have a visitor over? And I described him to her. And she said, no. And so she went out and was looking around. And I said, he was right there. We were pointing, and I still had the dogs with me. And my wife came out and I said, there's nobody out here. So I put the dogs in. I walked around the property, walked around her property. Nothing, Matt. Not a thing. I don't see things. Did I just see a ghost? I'm like, that's weird. My neighbor over there to the east, she thinks I saw a ghost. I'm like, I don't know. That was awfully real. I mean, I could even hear him walking. You can tell when you talk when a hard sole shoe's hitting a asphalt pavement.
Yeah.
But nothing there. And there's no way he could have gone down to the end, because that's over 120 yards to the end where the 90-degree turn is. The people across the street have a 5-foot horse fence. The people to the other side of Deb's house, they have a horse fence. And it's like, that was weird.
And I mean, you're in the country, you know everybody, you know all your neighbors.
We know everybody in this. I mean, this isn't like living in downtown Houston. We know who lives where, and we know what kind of dogs they have. We know their cat, it's just normal. But it was one of those strange things. I'd never seen anything like that before. And never seen anything like that since.
No strange vehicles or anything like that?
None. My street's a good half a mile long. I could see all the way from one end to another. And I could see where it makes that 90-degree turn down there 120 yards to the east of me. I could see up the hill that's right there. So if they'd have been parked anywhere within a quarter mile, I'd have seen it. And they couldn't have made it to that car. He'd have had to been able to run faster than a normal human. And we'd have heard that. He's gone.
And nothing from the dogs. That's also weird.
Nothing from the dogs. Now, these little dogs people laugh at Shih Tzus and little puggy nose. They're pretty perceptive. If there's a deer out in the yard, or if the Amazon driver comes up now, the ones I've got now, they don't miss a thing. They go off like a siren and bark and howl and everything. They didn't say anything to that guy. So, it's these weird things. I've learned I cannot dismiss this stuff. I've got to just keep my eyes open and keep looking, because there's more to what we see out here than what meets the eye commonly. And I mean, this is an additional thing. Thought I saw a UFO once back in the 90s. This is a funny story. Took off after it, and everybody's going, you're crazy. I said, no. And so this big oval thing at night, is moving around. First thing, UFOs don't have marker lights, red and green lights, navigation lights. I took off and I was chasing this thing, and I was zip zap, and I'd make a turn and it would make another turn. And this is in the countryside north of my Central Texas town. I finally I've got you now, man. I went down this road and rolled right up underneath the Fuji film blip. And I just started laughing. And I said, that was cool. Well, then I figured as he was going to the airport to get aviation fuel. So I went over there and I got out there and, well, here he comes in. He had a big Red Baron mustache and everything. He's from Austria. He was totally cool. And he was going to the UT football game the next day in Austin.
Wow.
And so, keep your eyes open. You never know. I mean, you've been lucky to where you've actually gotten to see one of these things when you were actually hunting for them.
Yeah.
And maybe some other things too. But, it's just, for me, I have to always look at the practical, but I also have to not dismiss everything. It's common. And maybe one of these days I will actually get to go out and have some fun out there. There was another little incident. Our friend Lowell and I went to Hanobia. Well, after he was gone, and I thought just for the fun of it, I was going to drive down that road that goes by the church camp where they have the get together.
Uh-huh.
And I'm driving down there, and I had my little digital camera propped up on a thing, and I'm just driving slowly down the road. Windows are down, and all of a sudden, this god awful stink comes through there. Oh crap! Nah, I think so. I don't think so. So I just accelerated on, kept going, went on, got back out on the main road. I said, I don't think so. And because I know that's not far from where those brothers' place is, and they still have stuff going on out there.
The same thing always plays in my head. So here we have these situations where it's like different events over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I know that you're a very analytical thinker.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, let's talk statistics. Let's talk about probability.
I know.
What are the odds that one person would experience all these things in a lifetime?
Well, I'm that one person. I've been all over the world. I've been all over the United States by car. I chose to do that, to go these different places. Because if you've ever seen that silly old movie, Secondhand Lions,
yeah,
there was a line in there that's precious by the brother that was played by, I think, Michael Caine. He goes, Texas was never big enough for Hope. It was never big enough for Randy either. And so I had to go see things. I had to go look. There's got to be something interesting out there. Well, I traveled a lot. The car I had when I saw that thing out there in San Saba already had 200,000 miles on it, and I bought it new. And so when you put yourself out there, you get a lot of exposure. Something's liable to happen. Yeah, those are my stories. Also, don't dismiss the things you don't understand, because just because of it, maybe later on you'll go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this makes sense. And at least it does to me now. Yeah. What are the odds?
So do you think all these things are connected somehow?
Other than me being in a lot of different places, going a lot of different places, no, I don't. I just put myself, if you put yourself like where something's likely to happen, eventually you'll get lucky and something will happen, or unlucky. And the last one that occurred less than 100 feet from where, well, maybe 200 feet from where I'm sitting right now, where I saw the guy out there. California, that was just part of my work travels, which took me to 40 plus states over those years while I was doing that. And I think I'm the curious kind. I got to go out and go look around. That's the only excuse I can make up for it.
There's just something about all this stuff. What is a creature like a Bigfoot, like the one you saw, doing in West Texas? And the same thing is in the Pacific Northwest and in Florida,
yeah,
and in the Northeast. All these different environments, all these different habitats, but there's
Oklahoma,
yeah,
Eastern Texas,
and they're seen in all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, my thoughts on it run like this. I started looking into the incidents. They're, until you get to Oklahoma, they're thin, but there's a whole string of sightings down that central part of the hill country.
Right.
all the way down to Fredericksburg. And I have friends that are work colleagues, not from the same company I work with. They work for a major oil company, and they've got dogman sightings, and they're pretty sure there's dogmen down towards Zapata, down there where it's real scraggly mesquite brush and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's no shortage of food for them down there. And when I found out that he was interested in it, we had fun talking about that. I have a hard time putting that into a box somewhere.
Yeah.
But people are seeing something. There are not that many people with issues where they might think they see something, and they're actually not. I think that if anything, they're somewhat migratory. They move up and down through the more rural areas, sticking primarily to water sources or nearby. It's a lot like our own hunter-gatherer pasts for the humans. If they are out there, they're moving along the known trails that they've often used to do what they need. And you get along that Texas-Oklahoma border, man, that is a serious hot spot. And we all know what happened at the big Indian casino there. They have that video that they saw.
Yeah.
And you talk about getting close to people. That's close. And that's a huge building. And it's coming up right in the trash cans. So I'm thinking there may be a relatively small population, but it's a relatively active population. They're real. Assuming so.
Are you keeping up with any of the UFO stuff?
Not really. I've heard the latest thing, they're now calling them UAPs.
Right.
Interesting that military, now they haven't talked about when they're out there being deployed. All the ones that are occurring around the U.S. coastline, I'm going to go back into my logic and reasonable side. They're occurring in what's called military operations areas, MOAs. When the military goes out there, they're burning a lot of gas, they're moving fast, they're doing combat maneuvers, but it's a designated area. All of a sudden they see something they can't explain, and it's inside their area. There's technology that exists that may be 30 to 40 years ahead of what they admit to.
Right.
And it is very possible that they are testing things. I had a friend, Mr. Knowles, it won't matter, I haven't seen him in decades. He described something that happened while he was a soldier in California. They were on maneuvers. They were moving as a group. He saw this large cylindrical thing basically appear. It had windows on the side of it. He could see people moving around in there, but couldn't make them out. And it was just hovering just above their road there, moving. And then it just faded away. And he and all his guys saw it, and they said, "Should we report it?" They said, "Oh, hell no. Don't." So, there are things that are going on. Someone knows the answer. Will it ever be us? I doubt it. But there are things out there that we don't know about. Are they ours? I suspect that thing that was seen down here near us on the Cash-Landrum incident was one of ours. And if you believe a guy, what is that guy's name? He claimed he was a man in black for the Air Force. He's got a lot of videos. He claims it was. He interviewed one of the pilots. It was a reverse engineered foreign or non-Earth made vehicle. And, but it's hearsay until I can see it proven.
Right.
Unless you or I see it, I have to question it. So, but yeah, I think if we just keep your eyes open, pay attention, that little shadow you thought you saw moving around the corner may not have been a floater in your eye. That face you saw on the other side of the parking lot one night through a FLIR, that was something. You saw it. You just have to have firsthand knowledge of it and be willing to accept, your findings, or at least be willing to research what you find.
And if you've had an encounter with Bigfoot or something else you can't explain and you'd like to share your story, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.